Hello everyone, welcome back, and today's we've got another news video here to discuss. We're looking at some signings that have happened from over the past couple of days, some injury updates, and we're looking at some more expansion and relocation talk, as there's been a lot of interesting pieces of news that have come out over the past couple of days, with all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Now, before we get straight, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you all for your support. I've never been able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below discussing today's video. Now, as usual, I'm going to start today's video off by discussing a couple of signings from the past couple of days. Now, as we talked about in our last news video, we left off on the signings that happened over on April 2nd. So I'm going to go over the signings that happened between April 2nd and April 4th. There's a long list of players who have been signed over the past couple of days, and I'll get to the rest of them in our next news video, hopefully on Thursday. So we'll get to all those here. So first, the New York Rangers signed two ELCs. First, they signed 2022 5th-round pick right shot defenseman Vittorio Mancini to a 2-year ELC with the AV of $870,000 within the start of next year. Now, he has been playing over in the NCAA. Last year had a pretty good season, putting up 8 assists in 32 games. This year, 4 goals, 6 assists, and 10 points in 40 games, so a lot better of a season than last year. Has even gone to 3 AHL games with the Hartford Wolfpack, putting up no points in a -2 rating, which is alright. I mean, he's a younger defenseman, so that's a pretty good sign there for the Rangers to get a solid defenseman locked up for the next couple of years on the ELC, so very good sign there for New York. Then we saw the Rangers sign 2021 4th-round pick, left winger Kalle Vasanen, who was signed to a 3-year ELC with the AV of $863,000. That'll begin at the start of next year. Now, Vasanen has been playing over in Liga the past couple of years. Last year had 4 goals and 5 points in 47 games. It was looking pretty good, but this year a ton better, putting up 9 goals, 14 points in 58 games. I mean, he looks fantastic. So that's a pretty good sign in my opinion for the Rangers. Vasanen, I think, could eventually be a solid third-line winger. So pretty good sign there for the Rangers to get another one of their ELCs done. Then we saw the Colorado Avalanche extend one of their pending UFAs in Chris Wagner, who's been a decent call-up option. He's been basically like a 13th, 14th forward for that team. He's a right wing / center. He signs a 1-year extension with the team with the AV of $775,000. That'll begin at the start of next year. So that's a pretty good sign there for the Avalanche. Wagner had been playing over in Boston the past number of seasons. The last 2 years has basically been a consistent AHL player. This year is basically split time. He's been at the NHL level a couple of times, but he's also been at the AHL level. Has 4 goals, 8 points in 17 AHL games. Also has a goal and an assist and 2 points in 12 NHL games, which is his first points at NHL level since 2020-2021 season. So very good stuff there for Wagner. He's actually fitting quite well with Colorado, and I'm not overly surprised that they wound up giving him an extension. So solid sign there for the Avalanche, this time a solid depth piece. Then we saw Anaheim Ducks sign Igor Sidorov, who was a 2023 3rd-round pick and played both sides of the wing. He gets a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $865,000 at the beginning of the start of next year. Now, Sidorov had been playing over in the WHL in his draft year last year at 40 goals and 76 points in 53 games, which is a pretty good point total. But this year, much better, putting up 50 goals and 88 points in 66 games. So he has played more games, but he's still over a point per game, which is fantastic. I think eventually it could be a solid middle 6-4 for the Ducks, so solid sign there for the Ducks to sign Sidorov. Then we also saw Ducks sign another player, another 2023 3rd-round pick, this time Colson Pater, who was a right winger, gets a 3-year ELC with the AV of $160,000 up against the start of next year. Now, for him, he's been playing over in the OHL the past couple of years. Last year had a fantastic season in his draft year, put up 25 goals and 60 points in 59 OHL games. This year's had a little bit of a down year. He's had 5 less points with only 55 this year in 6 less games, so not overly bad. He's still over a point per game, so I think the Ducks see that he has a future there as like a solid, maybe like 3rd-line winger, so very fantastic move up there for the Ducks. Then we saw the Seattle Kraken sign goaltending prospect Victor Osman, who was an undrafted player, to a 2-year ELC with the AV of $870,000. That'll begin at the start of next year. He's also been playing over in the NCAA. Last year had a fantastic season in 33 games, put up a 2.21 GAA and 918 save percentage. This year has been pretty much of a down year for him, putting up a 2.80 GAA and an 892 save percentage in 21 games. So hasn't been overly good this year, and hopefully he is able to do better next year. So some interesting stuff there. Then we saw the Chicago Blackhawks sign 2023 3rd-round pick Nick Lardis, who's a winger, can play both left and right sides, to a 3-year ELC with AV of $896,000. $6,000 that we're going to start next year. Now for Lardis, he's been playing over in the OHL last year. He was able to put up 65 points in 69 games, just under a point per game. This year has been way over a point per game, putting up 29 goals and 50 points in 37 OHL games. So it looks like a very fantastic prospect. Once again, could probably be like a third, maybe second line winger. So solid signing there for the Blackhawks. Then we saw San Jose Sharks sign probably the most coveted UFA prospect coming out of the NCAA, and Graf was an undrafted player, a right winger / center, to a 3-year ELC that's for the rest of this year plus 2 more seasons at a $940,000 AAV. Now Graf has been able to have a really good season over the past couple of years. Last year gone to 41 games in the NCAA level, put up 21 goals and 59 points, so very fantastic stuff there for Graf. This year even had more goals with 22, but a little bit less points with 49, but also played less games with 34, so still way over a point per game. Looked fantastic this year. There were a lot of teams interested in him, and the Sharks were able to land him. Graf has also gotten into 2 NHL games so far this year, can put up an assist as a +1, so Graf has looked pretty good for the San Jose Sharks, and hopefully it should be a very good stud there for Sharks for the foreseeable future. Then we saw the New Jersey Devils sign Dylan Wendt, who's a right winger, undrafted prospect, to a 2-year ELC with an AAV of $870,000 to begin to start of next year. Now, he's also been playing over the NCAA. Last year had 8 goals, 22 points in 39 games, but this year popped off, putting up 23 goals and 44 points in 38 games. He's been absolutely fantastic. He's even gone to 1 AHL game for the Devils, putting up an assist and a +1 rating, so he looks fantastic. I think eventually Wendt could be a really good winger for the Devils, so it's a pretty good pickup there for New Jersey, and maybe eventually it turns into something. And lastly, we saw the Arizona Coyotes send left winger Sam Lipkin to his ELC. He was a 2021 7th round pick. He gets a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $851,000, so we're going to start of next year. That's a pretty good sign there for the Coyotes. He's been playing over in the NCAA the past couple of years. Last year had 14 goals, 43 points in 39 NCAA games. This year had 15 goals and 35 points in 39 games. So a little bit of a lower point production this year, but still had a fantastic season, and has even gone to 2 AHL games since the signing, putting up an assist. So very, very fantastic stuff there from Lipkin, and hopefully he should be able to be a solid prospect there for the Arizona Coyotes. But those are signs that we've had over the past couple of days. We'll get to the rest of them, the handful that were still left on Thursday, so don't forget to stay tuned for that. Going over to a quick look here at some injury updates in the past couple of days. On Saturday, we saw Philip Deneau be cleared to play from his injury, Mitch Marner be cleared to play for his injury, Colin Blackwell for Chicago, and Brian Hagel from Tampa all be cleared to play. We saw a lot of guys go down with injuries. Arber Xhekaj had upper body injuries, got out for an unknown period of time. Tim Stützle, upper body injury, unknown period of time. Neighbors and Falk in St. Louis, upper body injuries, out for an unknown period of time. We also saw Kane Gouli's upper body injury be updated to day-to-day period of time, so interesting stuff there. And then we also saw John Mario have an undisclosed injury and is out day-to-day, so bad stuff there for New Jersey Devils. Then we saw Mikko Rantanen have a concussion. He's going to be out for a day-to-day period of time. Miles Wood has a lower body injury and is out for a day-to-day period of time for the Avalanche. Rasmus Sandin has upper body injury and is out for an unknown period of time for Washington. Dominic Kubalik is going to be out day-to-day with undisclosed injury for the Senators. And we also saw Curtis Lazar with upper body injury and Kaapo Kähkönen with undisclosed injury, both going to be out for an unknown period of time. So bad blows there for the Devils. We also saw McEwen for the Senators, Bogosian for the Wild, Corrali for the Jackets, Zaitsev for the Hawks, and Greenway for the Sabres. All be clear to play and get back into game action, so very good stuff there. And then we also saw Jared McCann go down with undisclosed injury, going to be out for a day-to-day period of time. Oliver Shillington goes down with undisclosed injury, going to be out for a day-to-day period of time. And then Ville Husso, who has recently been cleared to play, was sent down to a conditioning center, if I'm correct, for the Detroit Red Wings to the AHL. And in-season acquisition, probably the biggest trade before the trade deadline, Thomas Hertl was cleared to play and got his first game of NHL action yesterday for the Vegas Golden Knights. So interesting stuff there for Vegas. So lots of interesting injury this in the past couple of days. Bad news to see guys like Xhekaj and Gouli go down in Montreal. Bad news to see guys like Rantanen and Wood go down in Colorado. Marino, Kähkönen, and Lazar in New Jersey. Kubalik in Ottawa. Bad to see all those guys go down with injuries. Hopefully they're able to recover and get back into game action, not just in future, but good to see guys like Corrali get back for Columbus, Deneau get back for LA, Marner for sure get back for Toronto, Husso get back for Detroit, and a huge improvement there for Vegas to get Hertl back. So very good stuff there for Vegas, and hopefully those guys who are out right now are not going to be out for an overly long period of time, with only a week and a half to go before the playoffs. And lastly here, going over to a couple of quick pieces of news here, discussing quick updates on the relocation and expansion front. So it's been quite a while since we talked about expansion and relocation. I think the last video was about a month and a half ago, so there's actually been a couple of things before we talked about the stuff that happened yesterday that I wanted to discuss here first. So when we last talked about expansion, that we talked about how Utah had asked the NHL to open the expansion process, how there were some stipulations in there that they could take a team as early as next year, how that was sort of calling into question the Arizona Coyotes' potentiality to get an NHL arena in Arizona. We talked about all that stuff. So there's been a couple more developments on both the expansion front and the relocation front since then, before yesterday. So we'll get to the expansion stuff first. Around the trade deadline, I think it was right before, if I'm correct, or it might have been right after. I know it was right around the trade deadline because I didn't touch on it because I was really busy with the deadline stuff. There was an ownership group out in Atlanta led by former NHL player Anson Carter, who asked the NHL, just like the Utah group did, who wants to get an NHL team, to open the expansion process. Now, that was a really big step forward too. We know that Utah, at the very least, could get a relocation job from the Arizona Coyotes. So we know that if they were to ask to open the expansion process, and they could wind up getting the Arizona Coyotes. So that was a little more of a relocation and an expansion thing. But the Atlanta thing is more of an expansion thing. Atlanta really wants to apparently have an NHL team. And apparently this group that asked for expansion is not the only ownership group in Atlanta that wants to bring a team back to Atlanta. There's another group. I'm not exactly sure who's leading that group. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was another group that was building an arena in Atlanta that really wants to have Atlanta have an NHL hockey team. So that was really interesting news. So there are now two ownership groups in Atlanta who want to own an NHL team. So that's fantastic news. And there was also one of them in the Anson Carter-led group that wound up pushing for the NHL to open the expansion process. So those were some interesting developments. I haven't heard overly much about that since that came out until yesterday. So we'll talk about that in a second. But that was sort of the big developments on the expansion front, that the Anson Carter-led Atlanta-based group was trying to bring an NHL team to Atlanta, and it asked the NHL to open the expansion process. Then over the past couple of weeks, actually I heard some developments on the Arizona Coyotes. We heard about the fact that the Coyotes are currently looking at getting a piece of land. There was a lot of talk, would they go for an auction or would they not be able to? Well, they did wind up submitting their proposal to try and bid for the auction, and they did wind up being able to get it. So they will be able to bid on that piece of land to try and keep this team in Arizona. And I think that's fantastic news for the Arizona Coyotes. And a couple of days ago, they showed what the land would look like once all of it's completed. It's renovated and everything. It's shovels in the ground. The arena is complete. It looks quite nice in my opinion, but so did the Tempe thing too. So hopefully they're able to get this, but the auction date has been scheduled for June 27th, which is a really long time down the road. I think this basically puts relocation out of reach if it gets to June 27th. I mean, we saw that the Atlanta was able to relocate to Winnipeg on May 31st, which was pretty late in the season, but June 27th is going to be nearly impossible to relocate at that point in time. So if we do wind up seeing the Arizona Coyotes go to length and do wind up getting to the auction, at the very least, even if they lose the auction, which apparently the Arizona ownership group says is their last-ditch effort, if they don't get this plot of land in Arizona, then they are very likely going to be relocated. That won't happen until the year after. So if we do hit the auction, which is on June 27th for the bid for Arizona, and they don't pull out before then there's a very likely chance we'll see one more season for Arizona at Mullet Arena before they get relocated. But this is basically the Arizona Coyotes' last-ditch effort. I think even the ownership group in Arizona has stated that, saying that this is their last-ditch effort. If they don't get this piece of land for an arena in Arizona, there's no future left in Arizona. They will be relocated. So this is do or die right now for Arizona. So it's really interesting to see that. But at least they were able to get the auction. They were able to submit their proposal. They were able to be able to bid on the piece of land, and they should be able to do that. So that's fantastic piece of news and really good positive news for the Arizona Coyotes. But right before then, there was also some talk about the Arizona Coyotes owner, Alex Morello, talking to other potential buyers about what the team could be valued at should they sell. So as much as this is really good news, the auction sets that this team is going to try and keep this team in Arizona, there's a very likely possibility that behind the scenes they're also working on contingency plans. And I've heard Elliot Friedman say this. He said that if things were not work out, if it doesn't look like they were going to win the auction and the NHL wanted to try and move this team, they are definitely making contingency plans. And like I said, this is probably the only last-ditch effort to keep this team in Arizona. So if this isn't working and it doesn't look like the Arizona is going to win this sort of auction and get the piece of land, there's a very likely chance that potentially, not saying it's a guarantee by any means, but potentially they could pull out of the auction and move this team before. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But some interesting stuff there for the Arizona Coyotes to see if they are able to keep this team in Arizona or not. But we have gone 3 pretty big developments in the expansion and relocation stuff yesterday. Now, taking all of those things that we talked about aside, first, there was a lot of recent comments. I'm not exactly sure where it came from. I think it was from a press release or something. But the mayor of Scottsdale, which is close to where the new arena is being built, it's not in Scottsdale, so I'm not exactly sure how much of an impact this would have on Arizona getting the new arena. But the owner of Scottsdale said that he does not support the Arizona Coyotes' attempt to get an arena where they're trying to get it right now, and he says that he wouldn't really support it. Now, like I said, I'm not exactly sure how much impact the mayor of Scottsdale would have on this current project. I think what I've heard a lot of people say is he probably doesn't have very much say in what's going to happen, but he did apparently make mention about some of the water damage that the land might have, and something about it being close to Scottsdale. So I'm not exactly sure how much of a say he would have in this, but it does sound that Mayor of Scottsdale does not really approve of the Arizona Coyotes going after this arena situation, and we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens, but that's the first hurdle that the Arizona Coyotes are going to have to go through. Like I said, I think this arena is more in the Phoenix area and less in the Scottsdale area, but it sounded like it was really close to Scottsdale, so still not exactly sure how much of a say this has, but that's definitely going to be some opposition for the Arizona Coyotes to try and convince to get their new arena. But on top of that, there were 2 really interesting pieces of news that I found extremely surprising that came out on the same day that the Scottsdale mayor said that he wasn't going to support Arizona's attempt to try and get an arena where they're trying to get an arena right now. First, Ryan Smith posted on his social media feed that, remember, Ryan Smith, the guy who owns the Utah Jazz, who's leading the charge to get a Utah team in the NHL, put out a poll yesterday asking fans to vote on what a team's name should be, should they be able to get an NHL team. You don't usually see that being posted by ownership groups when they don't have NHL teams. That's a little bit, it's confusing to say the least, and it might just be a coincidence, but to have that be posted on the same day that there's pushback against the Arizona Coyotes arena situation, like I said, maybe just coincidence, but it is really weird, and you don't usually see ownership groups who are trying to get an NHL team post that sort of a poll until they actually have an NHL team. So that was sort of really weird, and it does sort of call into question how close is Utah to get an NHL team. And on top of that, Kevin Weeks put out another tweet. He's been really into all the expansion stuff, the relocation stuff. He's been really on top of all of this. He said yesterday that the Tillman Fertitta-led Houston group and the Vernon Krause-led Atlanta group, which I just remembered was the other Atlanta group, not the Anson Carter one that asked for expansion, but the other Atlanta group, were both meeting with the NHL yesterday. This is really interesting. It all comes out on the same day. Pushback against the Arizona situation, Utah's owner trying to get an NHL team, putting out polls saying what they should name a team, if they should get one, and then the NHL meeting with prospective ownership groups in Atlanta and Houston. This is all happening on the exact same day. As much as I can say this is potentially a coincidence, I can't see that being this. And you know that the NHL would not have approved of Ryan Smith. We talked about this before. Elliot Freeman's made an extremely good point about this, saying how the NHL is really invested in all of this. So he wouldn't have allowed Atlanta or Utah to put out the statement saying that they should open the expansion process if they didn't have Gary Bettman's approval. I highly doubt that Ryan Smith will put out a poll to fans saying what they should name their team if they get it without Gary Bettman's approval. I just can't see that. So if Bettman is approving potentially, like I said, I'm not putting words in his mouth, not saying he is, but it would be highly unlikely that Ryan Smith would do something like that without Gary Bettman's approval. So if that's the case, if Utah is asking fans what their team should be named, should they get one already, how close is Utah to getting an NHL team? On top of that, the pushback against Arizona. I know that Arizona's had some really good positive things. It looks like it's going to move forward to an auction in June. That's fantastic, but there's already pushback only a couple of days after the auction was announced. And then on top of that, they're meeting with prospective ownership groups in Atlanta and Houston yesterday. This is just my gut feeling. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I have no inkling of suspicion. I've not heard any rumors about this. This is just me. So my gut instinct is that the NHL knows, just internally, I'm not saying that it's a guarantee, I'm not saying that this is exactly what's happening, this is just my gut instinct, is that the NHL knows that there's a very unlikely chance they're going to get the Arizona arena situation. Apparently it's also going to cost a lot of money. I think I've heard some people say it's over $100 million, potentially even over $200 million, so there's going to be a lot of hurdles to go through to get that piece of land. So if we get closer to maybe late April, early May, and it's starting to look more and more likely like this Arizona situation is not going to work out in the Arizona Coyotes' favor, I think there's a very likely chance that in May, remember, this is just my gut instinct, I'm not saying it's going to happen, I think in May at some point we could see Arizona relocate to Utah, even before the auction happens. Now, I'm not going to say it's a guarantee, I'm not going to say that's exactly what's happening right now, but with all this rumors and stuff right now, that's my gut instinct right now, is that after the season's over, at some point, when the playoffs are in play, Arizona will move to Utah. And after that, at some point in the offseason, whether that be before the Stanley Cup Final, after the Stanley Cup Final, at some point before the draft or free agency, I'm not exactly sure when, there's a very likely chance that after that Arizona situation is figured out, the NHL is going to say we're going to open up the expansion process by adding 2 new teams in Houston and Atlanta. That's personally my opinion what's going to happen. And then we're probably going to say that 2 to 3 years down the road, once they get their act together, their arenas in place and things like that, we're going to have a new expansion draft. Personally, that's what I think. I think that they're meeting with Atlanta and Houston to sort of go through what they can do and how quickly they can start the expansion process. I think the reason why Ryan Smith is posting the names thing on Twitter to see what the fans think is because he knows that he's going to get an NHL team in the very near future. And I think the pushback against Arizona, all the hurdles they'll have to go through, I think may make this a little bit of a less likely situation. As much as I think Arizona will try their absolute best to keep this team in Arizona, with the recent rumors, I'm starting to get skeptical about them being able to pull this off. So that's just my gut instinct. Remember, I haven't heard this from anyone else, just my gut instinct. I personally think that we could see relocation by Arizona to Utah by May. And on top of that, at some point in the offseason, not exactly sure when, we'll get confirmation that the expansion process is now back opened. And then in a couple of years, we'll see Houston and Atlanta as their 33rd and 34th team in the NHL. This is just my speculation, but with the things that happened yesterday, that's sort of what I'm thinking about. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. Could we see Houston and Atlanta as the 33rd and 34th team in the NHL in the not distant future? Does Arizona get their team, and are they able to keep the Arizona Coyotes in Arizona? Or is Ryan Smith putting out the potential team names, asking fans what they think of that right now? Does that sort of indicate that Utah's getting a team in the not distant future? Definitely, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what you think about Arizona staying in Arizona, Utah either getting a team via relocation or expansion, and the NHL meeting with Atlanta and Houston yesterday. I'd definitely love to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. What do you think about the potentiality of having relocation and expansion this offseason? Definitely love to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. I'm going to this video, and if you'd like to subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support. I'm able to with you guys. So if you haven't already, leave the subscribe button down below, and if you leave a comment down in the comment section below, so there's no success in today's video. I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So if you check that out, I'll leave a link in the description below, and I can just see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.